This is VOA News. Via remote, I'm Marissa Melton. The United States accused Russia of using a UN Security Council meeting for, quote, lying and spreading disinformation as part of a potential false flag operation by Moscow for the use of chemical or biological agents in Ukraine. AP's Ed Donahue reports.
Russia's UN ambassador Vasily Nebenzia alleges U.S. biological activities in Ukraine. He said the louder people are trying to shift the blame on us, the greater is our conviction that we hit the nail on the head. U.S. UN Ambassador Linda Thomas-Greenfield's response?
There's only one aggressor here, and that is Russia.
President Biden spoke about the threat of Russia using chemical weapons.
I'm not going to speak about the intelligence, but Russia would pay a severe price if they use chemicals.
At the Pentagon, spokesman John Kirby called the Russian claim a bunch of malarkey.
You got to be careful what you see the Russians accuse others of, because it oftentimes ends up being what they're planning to do.
Ed Donahue, Washington.
A massive Russian armored column that's been at a standstill for days north of Kyiv has been dispersed on three sides of the Ukrainian capital, prompting fears the deployment is a prelude to a redoubled offensive. American defense officials say the Russian forces have moved 5 kilometers nearer to Kyiv, and artillery has taken up what are described as firing positions. The movement coincides with further military developments, including the shelling, for the first time, of the strategic eastern city of Dnipro, an industrial hub and Ukraine's fourth largest city. Ukrainian officials have been bracing for days for a concerted Russian push on Kyiv after satellites identified the buildup last week of that Russian column that at one point stretched for 60 kilometers. This is VOA News. The EU said Friday that the talks it is chairing on the revival of the 2015 Iran nuclear accord must be paused days after fresh demands from Russia complicated negotiations. EU Foreign Policy Chief Josep Borrell tweeted an announcement saying the talks must be paused because of external factors. He added that the final text is essentially ready and on the table. The current round of negotiations started in late November between Britain, China, France, Germany, Iran, and Russia, with the U.S. taking part indirectly. Their aim was to revive the 2015 nuclear deal with Iran, which began unraveling when former U.S. President Donald Trump withdrew from the deal in 2018. Last week, Russia said it was demanding guarantees that the Western sanctions imposed on its economy in response to the invasion of Ukraine would not affect its trade with Iran. Moscow had been expected to play a role in the implementation of a renewed nuclear deal, for example, by accepting shipments of enriched uranium from Iran. Borrell added on Friday that he would continue to be in touch with all participants and the U.S. to overcome the current situation and to close the agreement. 2 years ago today, the World Health Organization declared COVID-19 a pandemic. AP correspondent Rita Foley has more.
Since then, more than 6 million people have died globally, including nearly 1 million in the U.S. Millions of others have lost jobs. School has been disrupted for children and teachers. Stocks tanked, and we started wearing masks almost everywhere we went. In a matter of hours, the NBA was canceling games, and late-night comedians began filming from empty studios or even from their homes. And then the vaccines began rolling out. And now the number of COVID infections is dropping, as are the number of hospitalizations and deaths. So, is it normal yet? Yale infectious disease expert Dr. Albert Coe warns that new variants can emerge. The big question, he says, is are they going to be potentially more severe? I'm Rita Foley.
Majorities of Americans in both major political parties think voting rules in their states are appropriate and support a voter identification law. But Democrats are increasingly worried about progress in voting rights for Black Americans. A new AP poll showed fewer Americans now than 4 years ago said African Americans had achieved significant progress since the civil rights era. Concern about a lack of progress is much higher for Democrats. 86% of Democrats believe more must be done to secure racial equality in voting rights, compared with 40% of Republicans. More on that and all the stories we're covering at our website, voanews.com. Marissa Melton, VOA News. This is VOA News via remote. I'm Marissa Melton. European leaders continue their diplomatic efforts to end the war in Ukraine, but they're showing little progress. AP correspondent Ben Thomas has more.
Ukraine's President Vladimir Zelensky says he's told Israel's Prime Minister Naftali Bennett, who met with Russian President Vladimir Putin in recent days, that he would be ready to meet Putin in Jerusalem, but only with a ceasefire in place. The leaders of France and Germany spoke with Putin for more than an hour Saturday, pressing for just that. And the Kremlin says Putin laid out terms, which include Ukraine ceding territory and demilitarizing. French President Emmanuel Macron's office described the call as very frank and also difficult, adding the Russian leader offered no indication that he intends to stop the fighting. At a news conference Saturday, Zelensky said the Russians could take the Ukrainian capital only if they kill us all, adding, if that's their goal, let them come. I'm Ben Thomas.
Conflict raged near Kyiv on Saturday, and Ukrainian officials said heavy shelling and threats of Russian air attacks were endangering attempted evacuations of desperate civilians from encircled towns and cities elsewhere. Ukrainian President Zelensky said Russia was sending in new troops after Ukrainian forces put 31 of its battalion tactical groups out of action in what he called one of Russia's largest army losses in decades. He gave no details, and it was not possible to verify either statement. Ukraine's neighbors reported a dip in numbers of refugees Saturday as governments and volunteers struggled to find shelter for the nearly 2.6 million, mostly women and children, who have fled since Russia's invasion 2 weeks ago. You can keep up on the Ukraine news at our website, voanews.com. This is VOA News. A boat carrying around 24 migrants capsized off the coast of Libya in the Mediterranean Sea. AP correspondent Karen Chamas has that report.
Over a dozen people are now missing and presumed dead. Libya's Coast Guard said that a group of 23 migrants, mostly from Egypt and Syria, set off from the Libyan town of Tobruk. So far, only one body has been found and 3 migrants were rescued and taken to hospital. Search efforts are continuing in the latest tragedy at sea involving migrants trying to cross the Mediterranean into Europe. I'm Karen Chamas.
Saudi Arabia has executed 81 men over the past day, including 7 Yemenis and 1 Syrian national. This according to state news agency SPA on Saturday. The men were executed for charges including terrorism and holding so-called deviant beliefs. Saudi Arabia executed 67 people in all of 2021 and just 27 the year before that. The men included 37 Saudi nationals who were found guilty in a single case for attempting to assassinate security officers and targeting police stations and convoys. Saudi Arabia's human rights records have been under increasing scrutiny from rights groups and Western allies since the killing of Saudi journalist Jamal Khashoggi in 2018. Saudi Arabia denies accusations of human rights abuses and says it protects its national security according to its laws. SPA said the accused were provided with the right to an attorney and were guaranteed their full rights under Saudi law during the judicial process. Taiwan's president visited Army reservists training under a new scheme to bolster war readiness on Saturday. It's a program that has gotten added impetus from Russia's invasion of Ukraine, given China's bellicosity against the island. The war in Ukraine has stirred debate in Chinese-claimed Taiwan about its own readiness and tactics, should Beijing ever make good on threats to take the island by force. The Vatican on Saturday protested to Nicaragua over the effective expulsion of its ambassador to Managua, saying the unilateral action was unjustified and incomprehensible. Archbishop Voldemar Sommertag, who was ambassador since 2018, had to leave the country suddenly this week after the government of President Daniel Ortega withdrew its diplomatic approval of the envoy. And Pakistan on Saturday demanded a joint probe into a missile India said it had accidentally fired into its territory, rejecting New Delhi's decision to hold an internal inquiry into the incident. Via remote, I'm Marissa Melton, VOA News. This is VOA News. Via remote, I'm Marissa Melton. U.S. officials say Russia's lethal shelling in the western part of Ukraine, close to the border with Poland, is something they had anticipated. Russia's attack on a military base near the Polish border killed 35 people and wounded 134 others, according to Ukrainian officials. More on the U.S. reaction from VOA's chief national correspondent, Steve Herman.
U.S. National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan, appearing Sunday on CNN's State of the Union program, said American intelligence and national security officials were not surprised by the Russian attack near Lviv, where NATO has previously trained with Ukrainian troops.
What it shows is that Vladimir Putin is frustrated by the fact that his forces are not making the kind of progress that he thought that they would make against major cities, including Kyiv.
Sullivan, also appearing on CBS's Face the Nation program, said if Russia fires upon or even takes a shot at NATO territory, the military alliance will respond to that. Steve Herman, VOA News, Washington.
U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken condemned that attack on Sunday in a tweet, calling for the brutality, in his words, to stop as war inches closer to NATO's doorstep. He said, quote, "We condemn the Russian Federation's missile attack on the International Center for Peacekeeping and Security in Yavoriv, close to Ukraine's border with Poland." U.S. intelligence assessments say cities in western Ukraine, including Lviv, should not be considered safe ground. NGO workers in Lviv have been advised to leave. You can follow all the Ukraine stories we're carrying at our website, voanews.com. From Washington, you're listening to VOA News. Iran's ballistic missile strike on the northern city of Erbil, which caused no casualties but damaged some residential structures, has been criticized by leaders from across Iraq's political spectrum. Iran's Revolutionary Guard Corps claimed credit for the late-night strike. In a statement, the IRGC said it fired 12 ballistic missiles against what it alleged was an Israeli, quote, strategic center of conspiracy in Erbil. The influential cleric Muqtada al-Sadr issued a statement calling on the government to submit a protest note to the United Nations and the Iranian ambassador and to ask for guarantees that such an attack would not be repeated in the future. The U.S. Embassy in Baghdad condemned the missile attack, calling it a criminal act for which Iran must be held accountable. And Iraq's outgoing Prime Minister Mustafa al-Kadhimi called the attack an act of terror. Former U.S. President Barack Obama said Sunday he has tested positive for the coronavirus, though he's feeling relatively healthy. Former First Lady Michelle Obama is testing negative. The former president encouraged Americans to get vaccinated against the coronavirus despite the declining infection rate in the United States. There were roughly 35,000 infections on average over the past week. That's down sharply from mid-January when that average was closer to 800,000. The U.S. Centers for Disease Control and Prevention says 75% of U.S. adults are fully vaccinated. Just under 48% of the fully vaccinated have received a booster shot. The CDC relaxed its guidelines for indoor masking in late February. American actor William Hurt, known for films such as The Big Chill and A History of Violence, has died at age 71, according to his son. Multiple outlets cited Hurt's son, Will, who said in a statement, "It is with great sadness that the Hurt family mourns the passing of William Hurt." The actor had been diagnosed with terminal prostate cancer in May 2018, but his son's statement did not specify whether the disease contributed to his death. A recent spill of crude oil in the Pacific Ocean off the coast of Peru has had a devastating effect on more than 2,500 small-scale fishermen. January through March is usually a period of intense activity for the fishermen, but after the January 15th spill of nearly 12,000 barrels of oil in front of the Repsol refinery, they're finding fewer and fewer fish on their hooks and in their nets. Peru has characterized the spill as its worst ecological disaster. A UN report estimates about 2,100 tons of crude oil spilled. Via remote, I'm Marissa Melton, VOA News.